It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on a beautiful Friday evening in the state of South Carolina. Phil Kornbluth on the road on assignments at a secret location here in our beautiful state. Will Pelagic, not in a secret location, at our beautiful studios in downtown Columbia. Professor Tom Hayes, once again, don't know how he worked this out, is getting the start early to his weekend. Hope you've had a great day and looking forward to college football returning this weekend. High school football tonight, more NFL preseason games as well. No racing this weekend as everybody gets a break to rest up for Darlington next weekend on Labor Day, Sunday night. And they'll need their rest because it's going to be hot. It's going to be furious at the Lady in Black. Our phone number is 800-956-7266. Wide open for your calls tonight. Going to talk anything about the upcoming football season. I tell you, I don't know what else is left to be said. We've covered practically every angle that you can. I guess about the only thing left to be determined between South Carolina and Clemson will be the official naming of a starting quarterback on Monday at Clemson. USC seems to be pretty much settled in at all its positions, maybe a safety spot here or there, but for the most part, the Gamecocks are ready to go for Coastal Carolina a week from Saturday. And we have several news notes to pass along, including, Will, in 2020, when we do the Palmetto Pigskin Tour, we'll have at least a 12th tour stop on our agenda.
I know. I was wondering if this was going to make your lead news item today. I really did. I was wondering about that.
I think that when we start a football program in our state, that it's pretty big news. Erskine College announced today that it will start up a college football program again. They used to have a college football program, and they dropped it back in 1951, and they are going to restart the program in 2020. They're now in the process of hiring a head coach and assistant coaches to begin recruiting within the next couple of months, and they view this as a chance to kind of step up and take their image up. It's also a way to help increase enrollment, male enrollments at their school at a time when Erskine, like many schools, are looking for ways to increase funding and also increase enrollment. So the Flying Fleet will be back on the gridiron come 2020. They'll be starting off in a kind of I think it's going to be a Division III kind of program, but I think their long-term goal is to get to Division II and move into perhaps the South Atlantic Conference, or maybe follow North Greenville into the Gulf South if it gets to that point.
Well, it's weird, you think about the fact that Presbyterian in our state is dropping scholarship football and going into the Pioneer Football League. So as one kind of leaves, I guess Erskine might have felt that there's some room to kind of take and replace that spot. And again, this is not a slight to the folks who run the Blue Hose, but there is a lot of talent that comes out of the high schools in South Carolina and adjacent states. And the thing about Erskine is they get a little bit of a 2-year head start. They can start recruiting basically once they get the 3 coaches that they want to have on their staff to start, and then try and build some sort of a program. But again, as they say all the time, Corn, athletics is the front porch to a university, and athletic prowess, athletic success, that only does good things for the academic side of things when it comes to collegiate work. And I think that this is a big step for the folks at Erskine. And I'm curious to see who might be somebody who coaches the Flying Fleet. If it's somebody who is a collegiate assistant who wants a first chance to crack at it, or maybe a longtime high school person who wants a step up there in that regard.
I think that there'll be no shortage of applications. I think you hit a couple of categories right there. I would think that our friend and contributor on Sports Talk, Zach Willis, might be one to throw his hat into the ring, because I think he is itching to get back into South Carolina and itching to get back into coaching if he can find the right spot. And he might be an excellent fit for him in that he's been a winner every step along the way. He has coached in circumstances that Erskine will offer up. I mean, it's going to be a Christian environment. They're going to be in a Christian athletic league to start out. They want that kind of face for their program. So we'll see which way they go with this. It's going to be something that'll move pretty quickly as far as getting a coach in place and the assistants in place so they can get to work and getting the players in and start building for the future. So we welcome the Flying Fleet to college football once again. They had before they gave up football back in 1951, you go back and you look at the record book, and they played Florida State, and I believe either they tied Florida State or beat Florida State. I think soon after Florida State stopped being a women's college and was kind of new to the football thing, I think Erskine played them. Erskine had a player back in the day by the name of Dode Phillips, who's in the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame. He was one of those guys that could just do everything on the football field, and I think maybe he was a baseball player for him as well. One of the great players of that era in the state of South Carolina. One thing I like about the fact that we've got college football back now, Will, is that really I'm sick of the talking. I'm sick of the issues.
Right.
I'm sick of the buffoonery on Twitter, the hype videos, we run faster than you do. We lift more weights than you do.
We do more than the one-handed catches than you do. Those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, now is the time where we're going to separate the men from the boys. A hype video is not going to save you now. When you step on that field starting, well, around here next week, you got to start proving yourself week in and week out, and we'll really see what you got.
Well, for the two biggest programs, this is an appetizer, at least because of the fact that you get almost a main draw type of game in week number 2 for both, with South Carolina facing Georgia September 8th, and also with Texas A&M hosting Clemson in week number 2 in a big non-conference tilt. The Gamecocks getting Coastal Carolina and Clemson getting Furman. I'm very kind of curious to see just how these two teams have transformed themselves, because Clemson had some real offensive issues at the end of last year that Alabama exposed, and South Carolina has basically remade its entire offense. And we've heard so much about how the offensive line has improved, and Will Muschamp was very bullish on that, not only on his call-in show last night, but also at the Columbia Touchdown Club and in media availabilities throughout the fall camp season. I want to see where they have made the changes that are necessary to do what is best for Jake Bentley and this offense. And for Clemson, just how do they handle the 3 quarterback, or if you want to just take Chase Bryce out, no offense to what Dabo Swinney tries to say, but I think this really is a 2-horse race. How do they handle the ensuing awkwardness that is going to be the Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence situation? And because, as we've talked about over the course of the offseason, there will be factions that develop in the locker room, and there will be people who latch on to one guy or the other.
Well, that's what they have to prevent. And, at Clemson, they kind of preach that they're different. And I know what you're saying. It's human nature for that to happen on a football team. But I think that those guys came back to win a national championship. And, they might support Kelly Bryant. I'm talking about the defensive guys and the older guys. They might support him. And if he's doing well and they are winning and he's moving the team and doing what he's supposed to be doing, that will be well and good, and Trevor Lawrence will get his snaps. But if he is not, then they will certainly, I think, be understanding that they've got to give Trevor Lawrence a shot to see what he can do. And if he goes in and is successful and is moving the team is winning, those guys will support him. It's what Tony Elliott said after spring practice. It still rings clear to me today, and that is ballers like to play with ballers. And if you can't live up to where they are to help them win, then it's next guy up, and they're behind that guy. So I don't think, if it's done fairly and it's proven to them that, look, if we're going to go where we think we're going to go, we need this guy to play, I think everybody will be behind it.
Plenty of room for your phone calls here, 800-956-7266, Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Remember, if you lose us over the air, you can find us on TuneIn Radio, the radio.com app. Use our Columbia affiliate, 100.7 The Point, or our Periscope video feed at SportsTalkSC on Periscope and Twitter, and also online at SportsTalkSC.com. High school football week 1. We talked that with David Shelton next on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Have a lot to get to here on Sports Talk. A couple of recruiting notes, including a couple of USC basketball offers that went out today. We'll talk about some surprises in camp for football for South Carolina and Clemson and predicting the winners of some of the remaining position battles left for both. We'll talk NASCAR and golf second hour as well, and also kind of what's left on the recruiting boards for both South Carolina and Clemson. There's also been some moonwalking that has taken place in the Buckeye State. We'll get to that here in a couple of moments, and also your phone calls, 800-956-7266 is how you get to us on Sports Talk. But first, Corn, it is now week number 1 as opposed to week 0 when it comes to the high school football slate. We now have a full slate of games to talk about as opposed to last week when probably we had 85% of the schools involved in the state.
Yeah, there were a lot of games last week for a week 0, and of course some teams are off tonight for week number 1, but now it's officially week number 1 in terms of the high school league calendar. We welcome in David Shelton of the High School Sports Report and the Charleston Post and Courier as we look ahead to tonight's games. And David, as I was scouring the state looking at matchups tonight, I saw quite a few that really caught my eye throughout all the divisions. And I guess if you start with the big guys in 5A, Dutch Fork got rained out last week, and they will open up tonight at home against Spring Valley. I think that's a pretty good matchup. Spring Valley, a team that made the playoffs last year and had a really good squad. Does Robin Bacon have a team this year as close to what he had last year?
Well, I think they're going to be a playoff team again. I think they'll be a very competitive contender in their region. Not sure if they're going to be ready for tonight. Dutch Fork has a lot of pent-up frustration and ready to roll because they didn't get to play last week. So I think Dutch Fork's the better team. I think Spring Valley's got enough athletes in some key spots to keep this game competitive, at least for a while. But I think both teams will end up being playing in November. So, but good opener for both teams. Kind of give you a good chance to see where you are.
Yeah, and you look around the upstate, you got Gaffney at Greenwood, Spartanburg at Greer, Northwestern at Burns, Powdersville at Belton Honeypath, like all those games. Also Newberry at Abbeville, Broome at Woodruff. Which of those games really jump out at you?
I think the Spartanburg-Greer game is going to be an interesting game. I think both those teams are state title contenders. Greer got the short end of the stick last week against Burns, but I think they're going to be a very good team. And I was reading somewhere today on Twitter or whatever, it's like 40 years since they played each other. So that's kind of hard to believe that Greer and Spartanburg haven't played over the years. But that'll be a good one. I think Abbeville-Newberry will be a good one. Good test for Abbeville. A good test for Newberry, who's, obviously without Amir Abram at the tailback spot, they're going to be a different team. Burns Northwestern got hammered last week by South Point, which a lot of people will get hammered by South Point, but I think Northwestern kind of needs to have a better showing tonight, win or lose. They need to be a little more competitive if they're going to be a team that we're talking about in November.
And that's a hard really judge there with that Greer game last week against Burns. Again, when you go up against that team, that's obviously something where it's a hard judge in week 1. Do you think we get a fairer test for Greer this week?
Well, I think Spartanburg is still a legitimate 5A team. I think Greer, win or lose, I think Greer is going to be around deep in the playoff. They can be 0-2 and just win their conferences. They're going to win. They're going to be 1 or 2 in their region. It'll be between them and Greenville. So, I definitely think that this is a better test for Greer. Greer was in that game. They actually led Burns last week for a time there. So I think they competed very well. Just they got away from them in the fourth quarter.
David, we look at some of the other games around the state, and I love to look at some of the 1A and 2A matchups and see which ones look good. And Landrum at Dixie, and now Dixie going to be sharing a little football stadium with Erskine College in a couple of years. But Dixie, big win last week. Landrum's 1-0 as well. Is that a pretty good matchup on paper?
Absolutely. I think Dixie opened a lot of eyes with their win over Christchurch, not only their win, but their shutout. And then Landrum is a pretty good football team. So I think that'll be a very interesting game. Also, I think defending 2A champs, Abbeville taking on Newberry. I think that'll be one to watch. And, but in the lower level, not a lot of great matchups. I think those come later on in the season when they get into region play, because you got so many 1As playing up, playing 2As or 3As. But I think when they get in their region, it'll be a lot better matchup.
How about this Johnsonville at Lakeview matchup?
Could be a good game. I think Lakeview kind of stinging from that loss last week to Hannah Pamplico. They lost by 2, and a lot of people, go wild by big upset. But I think Hannah Pamplico is a really good football team. So Lakeview's got a lot of seniors, but not a lot of experience. They got a lot of guys that were backups that are playing. Got a new quarterback, so he's learning on the run. But this will be a good test for them, because I think Johnsonville is very competitive. I mean, I like Lakeview to win the game, but I think it could be a very competitive game.
Wando and Somerville's big in the Low Country tonight. Of course, David, you had a little feature on Somerville's starting quarterback. What's the intrigue there?
Well, he's a guy that was a basketball player growing up, and then if you read my story, he almost didn't go to practice his freshman year and was not going to play football, but his grandma made him, and now he's a starting quarterback at Somerville with a Liberty scholarship. Good football player. He was an athlete playing quarterback. Now his quarterback skills have developed to the point to where obviously Liberty likes him as a quarterback. But I think this is going to be a game where Somerville gets better. Their defense is really good. Wando has a very good defense, but they don't have an offense right now. They're really struggling to find players, running backs, quarterbacks, an identity. I just think it's going to be very tough for Wando to go into Somerville and beat them tonight.
Where are you headed tonight?
I am at Berkeley High School. They're playing Ashley Ridge, 2 5A schools. I think this is a very important game. Now, I know it's week 1 and it's the second game for both teams, but there'll be a lot of questions answered tonight, because both teams sort of had an easy route last week. But these 2 teams will get after it tonight. I think the winner sets themselves up to be a really strong team, and the loser's going to know what they need to fix. It's 2 good teams, 2 good quarterbacks. I think maybe Berkeley's got a little bit more in the skill position, but neither team lit it up on defense. They both have new players on defense, so could be some scoring here tonight.
And I understand, David, in addition to not just Berkeley, but also Bishop England, there's a story by your colleague Derek Asbury, who said apparently they have been starting the use of drones instead of having people up there on ladders doing the aerial videos of practice and the aerial photos of practice to kind of keep things out. We have entered the drone era of high school football.
Yeah, I think you're going to see more and more do it. I think a lot of people are one, you got to have somebody to man the drone, to operate it from the sidelines. But, you can find a really smart, kid that plays Fortnite, that can do that. But, and a lot of people think it's an expensive thing. It's not as expensive as you think. And I've seen Berkeley's in action. I've seen Bishop England's in action. I think it's really neat. You can get a great view. And you just got to keep it at a certain height so you don't throw a ball and hit it, because if you break one of those, it might not be good. But I think you may see that over the years, something that develops, because I think it is a very good tool.
Quan, we need a drone. We need one now for Sports Talk. We need a
Sports
Talk drone.
All I know is that I know somebody who drones on and on and on sometimes.
So do I. So do I.
Rip shot.
I'd love to have a drone. I'd love to have a drone flying overhead Sports Talk, giving us that look from above us. That would be quite cool.
Let the professor run that. Don't y'all stay away from the controls.
All right, David, thank you very much. We'll look forward to having you with us tonight here on the high school scoreboards at 10, 10:30, and 11. Enjoy your game.
Okay, man. Y'all take care.
That is all right. David Shelton from the High School Sports Report, the Charleston Post, and Courier with us tonight, setting the stage for another night of high school football. Don't forget those scoreboards tonight. We'll have all the scores for you from across the state. More scores in 5 minutes than anybody else gives you in 10 minutes. We give it to you faster on the high school scoreboard. Back in a moment.
We're back on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Time for your phone calls at 800-956-7266. Your thoughts on the Gamecocks, Clemson, high school, start of football this week as well on the FCS level. A couple of games tonight as well as tomorrow. We'll get back into more of the Carolina and Clemson talk in a moment, but Corn, I did want to at least read the latest attempt at damage control from the folks in Columbus. Urban Meyer placed a statement on his Twitter account and distributed it out via the various channels in Columbus, saying that his words and demeanor on Wednesday did not show how seriously he takes relationship violence. I sincerely apologize. He says he was taught at a very young age that if he ever hit a woman, he'd be kicked out of the house, never welcome back. I have the same rule in my house and in the football program at Ohio State, except for the fact that he let the guy stay there for 3 more years. Over the years, we've worked hard to educate and remind our coaches and players of the seriousness of relationship violence. I understand my lack of more action in the situation has raised concerns about commitment. I once again apologize for this and extend my empathy to all women, men, and families who are affected by relationship violence. It's been a real learning experience for me. I fully intend to use my voice more effectively to be a part of the solution. And let me say here now what I should have said on Wednesday. I sincerely apologize to Courtney Smith and her children for what they have gone through. Do you believe any word of that line of lawyer-performed baloney, Corn?
No, it's too late. I mean,
Yes.
Come on. How many times did he have an opportunity to say and do the right thing? Just go back to Big Ten Media Day when he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And then he had ample opportunity from then until now. And, yes, that's obviously written for him by a PR firm or an attorney or somebody. So, no, I don't buy it. And they're just going to have to live with it up there at Ohio State, and we'll see how people react to him. There's been no strong outcry from the political organizations across the country that I've heard related to women's issues. Nobody has started a protest or a march or anything like that. So you know what's going to happen? It's just going to be forgotten about as they play out the season and they win ball games and they move towards a potential playoff spot. Now, it will perhaps come up when the spotlight grows brighter later in the year. The games become more important, maybe the Michigan game, maybe some other Big Ten game they have later on, or if they make it into the playoffs and they've got all that time where the networks are focusing on them, it could be something that surfaces again. Or if another report comes out from somebody with new, fresh information, or if Courtney Smith herself goes on a campaign on television or in some form of the media to bring it back up. But otherwise, I think it's just going to go away.
My only thing, and again, I know we've probably talked about this a lot more than I know I and you both want to talk about it, but again, it involves a program that's highly prominent in our sport. My only thing is a lasting thing is what made this guy, other than the fact that his mentor or the Urban's mentor was the gentleman's grandfather, what made this guy so important that he needed to be on the staff as long as he was after repeated instances of malfeasance?
Yeah, it's hard to figure. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know what the relationship was between the two. Obviously, Meyer knew this guy for a long, long time, going back to his days at Florida, and he protected him at Florida from his malfeasance. And he brought him with him to Ohio State. He has the obvious strong family connection to the Buckeye program, and he's protected him there. So I don't know if it's some sort of allegiance to the guy for whatever reason.
Maybe he had something on
sitting on information about Urban. Yeah, who knows? Maybe who knows? But, Zach Smith definitely needs to go away. I mean, the dude got on Twitter yesterday and just created a firestorm by trying to dismiss this thing in some form or fashion. He definitely just needs to go away. Urban needs to go away as well. He is not going to happen. He's going to be the coach at Ohio State. And as we talked about last night, what a weak administration and athletic leadership they have at Ohio State. Seriously, they should be ashamed. I would definitely think that administrators here in our state would be much stronger than that and take a much stronger position. Let's hit the phones, 800-956-7266. We go to, is it Danny and Dylan?
Yes.
First up tonight here on Sports Talk. Hello, Danny. How are you? Welcome in.
Hey, how you doing? I just heard you answer my question as you were talking. I couldn't believe this guy had a rep sheet going back to 2009, and Ohio State even hired the guy. I mean,
it's mind-boggling. It truly is mind-boggling. Yeah, it defies explanation to the common sense person. Okay, I mean, I know to the fans of Ohio State, they're supporting their coach, and I get that. There are times you want to support your coach because he's being unfairly treated, but your coach stepped into this. Okay, nobody led him or pushed him. He stepped into it. This is his own mess. He made this mess, and now he's got to deal with the consequences. And continuing now to fake forgiveness is this is even more absurd.
He should have just said
going
nothing.
Back and looking at the press the other day. I mean, yeah, he wouldn't even say Courtney Smith's name. That should have been the first thing out of his mouth. There should have been heartfelt, tear-stained apologies, and it wasn't even close.
Well, it's weird, given he had an opportunity to, I don't want to say make this right, but he had an opportunity to turn this into something that was a positive step forward, and all that they did was stonewall themselves. And that's the part of it that I just don't and can't stand for. And, I know that it will probably go away, the story will, but I really hope that someone at least tries to keep the pressure on them to be like, hey, by the way, you enabled a woman beater, and you enabled somebody to be with your program that ordered sex toys to the football office. Like that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean, and what did he do? What did he do at the White House?
Took a picture of his junk with a
we know
towel.
What he did.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's just
I mean, it's
a weird dude.
I mean, the guy has got some he's got some
issues,
things going on upstairs that are a little bit out of whack. But anyway, let's move on. 800-956-7266. This is why I'm glad the games are here. Maybe we can start focusing on fumbles and interceptions and touchdowns and wins and losses.
The problem is they fumbled
Glenn
this bad.
In North Charleston. They did. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
How you doing, guys?
What's up, Glenn?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to let you guys know I'm going to be at the Citadel get together with the team and wish them luck and stuff. And I'm going to try to introduce Sports Buzz as first blind sideline reporter. How do you think about this?
So you want to be on the sideline reporting on a game on Sports Buzz?
Yeah, because
I don't think they're going to let you do that, though, Glenn. I think they've got all kind of contractual regulations and stipulations and obligations that will probably prevent you from doing that. I mean, hell, we can't hardly get a media credential anymore as tight as these things have gotten.
Or park, for that matter.
Thank you, Glenn. Good luck with that. Let us know if it works out for you. All right, 800-956-7266 is our phone number.
I don't want to do anything on that. I'm just leaving that one alone.
Hey, there's one high school. You know what? I meant to mention this today, but did you see this high school note coming out of Bluffton? The Bluffton administration is asking that nobody come to tonight's game with body paint. They're playing May River.
Is there
kind of a rival down there?
Is there context to that? As in, like, is there something
anybody
bad?
that has paint on will not gain entrance to the game or be asked to leave. Now, I saw a follow-up tweet. And I'm hoping this is coming from somebody with knowledge who said that some kids are going to paint themselves white and some are going to paint themselves black and go to the game.
Is that?
I don't know what all that means.
I mean, kids these days, man. Why do kids have to ruin everything? The millennials are ruining everything. Ruining body paint.
I thought it was the adults that ruined everything.
No, it was the millennials who ruined everything. That's the thing with their avocado toast and their their nap pods and all that stuff. It's crazy.
All right, we'll be back. 800-956-7266. We got recruiting coming your way. We'll be visiting with George Bryan III, the latest from the Northern Trust, where somebody named Jamie Lovemark is tied with somebody named Brooks Koepka. Heard of one, not the other. We'll be right back.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
800-956-7266. Later on, we're going to talk about the surprises for South Carolina and Clemson coming out of camp. Also, kind of predicting the winners of the big position battles for both, and looking also at their recruiting needs with, of course, Corn's recruiting report to come. But we did get some big basketball news today, Corn. We now know the full South Carolina men's basketball slate, and the schedule maker at the SEC seems to have some sort of obsession with starting Carolina out on the road, because it's the 4th year in a row and 7th out of 8 that the Gamecocks will have to start the league season away from Colonial Life Arena.
Yeah, it's something they've gotten used to, but then again, they get to finish at home. So it all evens out in the long run. And the thing is, they don't get Kentucky at home. They get Kentucky on the road this year. Only one game at Kentucky. So you already knew the non-SEC slate. The Gamecocks will open up the regular season at home November 6th against Upstate. And they'll play Stony Brook, Norfolk State, and Providence. And then they could be playing Michigan or George Washington in that event up in Connecticut. They get Wofford and Coastal Carolina at home. They go to Wyoming. They go to Michigan. They'll play Virginia and Clemson at home in North Greenville to close out the year. And then they open up at Florida. Good place to start. Mississippi State at home. Missouri at home. At Vandy, at LSU. Auburn at home. Then they go to Oklahoma State for the challenge. Then finish up with SEC play at home against Tennessee, road games against Georgia, Kentucky, home to Arkansas, then to Tennessee, home to A&M, and home to Ole Miss. They go to Mississippi State, Alabama at home, then at Missouri, at Texas A&M, and finish up home with Georgia. So
tough
they
slate.
do have some of the long trips. Yeah, they got to go to Missouri. They got to go to A&M. They got to I don't think they go to Arkansas, right? They get Arkansas at home.
Arkansas is at home.
So that's a little bit of a break. But they do go to LSU. So they got quite a number of extended trips on the schedule for this year. And, yeah, it's SEC basketball. I mean, you look up and down the schedule and you see, for example, a much improved Tennessee program. That'll be very difficult. Of course, an Alabama program, which is on the move, and it'll be difficult. Georgia, with their new coach, Tom Crean. We'll see what he's able to do. Florida will be Florida. Kentucky will be Kentucky. Yeah, it's a tough slate up and down. And then you look at the preseason slate, and, you know, they'll be ready for it by playing Michigan, Virginia, Clemson. That'll really help them get ready for their SEC schedule. So it's a good schedule. And I tell you what, if you do well enough, you're not going to have any concerns come Selection Sunday, because strength of schedule should be good, but you got to win some games. Just having them on paper is not going to be enough.
Yeah, this is something where last year I know we talked about how the SEC slate was obviously, and the SEC as a whole was starting to get kind of more momentum, and a lot of people were talking up the league going into the year, saying it might have been the best year of the league, and obviously that bore itself out with as many teams that made the NCAA tournament. The one thing that South Carolina did not have last year that it does this year is a representative non-conference schedule. You might be playing Michigan twice. You have Virginia, an ACC school, coming here. You have Clemson, an ACC school, obviously, that they play every year. Providence out of the Big East is no slouch, and obviously the other games that go along with it, especially playing up at the Mohegan Sun tournament. So from that perspective, and of course Oklahoma State on the road is also a tough one in the Big 12 Challenge. This will be a very, very key year, I think, for kind of the pivot forward, whether or not South Carolina can manage and weather the storm, especially with all those young freshmen who've come in here. It's going to be very, very curious to see. I don't know if the NCAA tournament is something that they can attain with how difficult the schedule is and what they have, but they at least have better bodies in place to be able to make things happen with this schedule. I wouldn't have liked to see last year's team with this year's schedule. It might have made things look even worse than they did a year ago.
All right, we go to Alex in Myrtle Beach. Next with us here on Sports Talk. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Well, wonderful. The weather is still hot and humid, but I like this. It hadn't been over the top, like it's been recently. So I actually like this. A little cooler. If I may, I just make a quick statement about Ohio State and Tiger Woods. Phil Mickelson match, and I'll get off and listen to the answer. Ohio State, is there not a risk that the Not Me Too movement and other people that could down the line start boycotting and disrupting outside of Buckeye Stadium? I mean, it could not be more repercussions. And quickly about the Tiger Woods Phil Mickelson match, I'm a big golf fan. Like we got here in the country, I don't have the Golf Channel. I was surprised. I got to get. You know what? I've gone without getting the Golf Channel. I probably was watching too much of it. I love golf, but now I hear that match is going to be on pay-per-view, and I'm just disgusted. You know, that's why I like hearing. Like, I'm a big Gamecock fan. I love Gamecocks. I'm a big college football. I don't pay as much attention to pro, but this crass commercialization of sports, and that's why I said I moved away from Charleston for a long time, moved back, started going to Berkeley, Stratford games, and it was just pure football, and it was a blast. And I'm just disgusted now that this Tiger Woods Phil Mickelson match, and I love golf. It's now pay-per-view. I just almost don't even want to watch any of it. But I'll get off and listen to your answer, and have a good night. Bye.
Yeah, I'm with you. I will not be buying it. I'm sorry.
Oh, come on, Corn. Don't be a party pooper.
I'm sorry. I'm pooping all over it. I will not be purchasing that. It's not, it's nothing I care. Well, why? I mean, why? I mean, Phil he's doing well in this tournament, and he's still Phil, and he's a great attraction. But I mean, when they play each other in the real events, when they play in the majors, and that's when they're competing against one another. That's when it matters. And they did this. Didn't Phil and Tiger do this once already? Many years ago, it was a big bore.
They had the battle of the big
bore.
Yeah, the battle of the bighorn. That was,
terrible.
Match play golf when it's just two dudes is a lot of downtime and a lot of lag time. That's why I think it's a pay-per-view, because I probably don't think that you could have gotten any of the major networks to possibly to take it. Especially the time of year that it's being put on. It's the Thanksgiving weekend. It's a heavy football weekend. CBS has got their SEC contest. Usually the Iron Bowl is that weekend. So in Clemson, South Carolina is that weekend.
Two best golfers in the world. That's my point. What's it going to prove? I mean, really, this is doing nothing but fattening their wallets. I mean, it's not going to prove anything. Neither one is the number one player in the world. I know Tiger is on his way back up, and everybody's excited, as am I. But, I mean, look, Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka would be the two that you would probably want to pair in some kind of a showdown if you were trying to say, okay, these are the two best guys in the world right now. No, that's to me, it's a waste of time. I'm not buying it.
The other answer on the Ohio State, yes, I think that there still can be some significant pressure put on by the Me Too movement, but the problem with this is that the same problem that they had at Baylor and at Penn State, tribalism has taken over at Ohio State and Columbus, and inside that state, that program can do no wrong, and they prioritize. They've made very, very clear that they prioritize winning over the safety and domestic violence and the safety of women and things of that nature, and it's sick. So,
and you know what? I mean, how do they rationalize firing Jim Tressel, a guy who also won a national championship
over tattoos
at Ohio State, over what he did compared to this? That's what I don't understand. That's why I wonder about these really smart people that run these universities. Just what kind of common sense do they have when it comes to the real world? They've been so much, stuck in the library all these years. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying they don't get what the real world issues are all about and how you relate to it. That just makes absolutely no sense.
I think you're giving them a tad too much credit in the intelligence quotient area. But in that regard, in my mind, I'm not a believer that they really think about anything other than two things: the bottom line and their ability to create championships. Outside of that, I really think that they've shown their true colors at many of these major programs.
All right, when we come back, it'll be time to talk some golf. George Bryan III. We will get to recruiting coming up in a little bit. We do have news on a new USC offer, and actually two offers going out by the Gamecocks in basketball, plus an update on Michael Dukes, the running back from down in the Charleston area. That'll be coming up in recruiting. Monty Dutton will join us for the full Monty on NASCAR at the bottom of the next hour. So stay tuned for all of that and more. Friday edition of Sports Talk.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show. 800-956-7266.
We sit 8 days away from the start of the college football season. It's Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblut here today with you as we continue on our trek towards the collegiate football start of the season. Some college football this weekend, and also we'll talk more about South Carolina and Clemson coming up. We have the full Monty on NASCAR at the bottom of this hour, and also kind of get into some of the winners of the position battles that we have here. But our focus now shifts, Corn, to the golf world and Paramus, New Jersey. Northern Trust opening of the FedEx Cup playoffs. Some South Carolina flavor at the top of the leaderboard.
And let's welcome in George Bryan III for birdies and bogeys around the state of South Carolina and on the PGA Tour with the playoffs underway. And George, got a guy leaving his mark, so to speak, in the tournament. Jamie Lovemark. I had to look him up, but he's actually a guy that's got 3 top 10 finishes this year, $1.3 million in the bank. He's a Southern Cal guy, and he is tied for the lead with a guy named Brooks Koepka, who continues to play extraordinary golf at 10 under par.
I'll tell you what, that's pretty impressive. And once again, too, it's just amazing to me that South Carolina's part of the story. Dustin Johnson, he's sitting right there. And, you know, I love I think the playoffs have added quite a spark to the golf season. And I'm kind of a fan. It's growing on me. It's better. I have to admit, it's better to be there than here. I'll say I enjoy here, but I'd rather be there, and I know Wesley would too.
Well, this looks like it's going to be a very competitive weekend. You've got the cut came in at even par, so you've got a bunch of folks within about 3 or 4 shots of the lead. Some very good players. Phil Mickelson, of course, is had a good day. He had a 68, back-to-back 68s. He's at 60. He's at 6 under, so he is just 4 shots back. You mentioned Dustin Johnson. He's 8 under, just 2 back. Kevin Kisner's at 4 under. Sam Saunders is at 2 under. Tiger makes the cut on the number, back-to-back 71s. He's at even. Russell Henley, Scott Brown, William McGirt did not make the cut. Jordan Spieth will be around. He's at 2 under, so it's shaping up to be a heck of a 2 days up there to finish this thing out.
Hey, I can tell you, too, if you made the cut on the PGA Tour, you do have a reasonable chance. And I love to see players like Kisner keep it going. Don't know what the weather's going to do this weekend. That'll be interesting. And the one thing I can tell you is there's one player that has got the hot hand, and I think everybody will be watching, and that's Koepka. I mean, goodness gracious, he's making golf look really easy. And Jamie Lovemark, he's this guy. Been watching him from afar, seen him play several times, not necessarily in the group with Wesley, but he's been playing sneaky good, and he is not afraid. Jamie Lovemark can win this event. It'll be a lot of fun watching him.
For the guys who are not playing now, who did not make the playoffs, like Wesley, what are they doing?
Well, unfortunately, a few of them, depending on their status, they'll be going through this 4-tournament web playoff to get their privileges for next year. Unfortunately, a player like, for example, Matt Atkins from Aiken, he'll have to go back to second stage. He won't even get into the playoff. So the web.com tour has a 4-event playoff system, and they take the top 25 from these 4 events, and they get tour cards. And the top 25, meaning the ones who earn, that's off the money list. So we got some South Carolina boys. I think Jay Bird ends up in that group, Jonathan Bird, and there'll be a few others. Wesley, though, will be exempt next year, so he doesn't have to endure that 4-event playoff. But that's quite an improvement over the way it used to be, in that you play 4 events to earn your privileges on the PGA Tour next year versus just a 1 4-round qualifier or 3 stages of qualifying. And so you got the top 75 from the web.com. They get a shot at earning a PGA Tour card. And then the bottom, basically from 125 to 200, or you'll see mostly 150 on the money list or the FedEx Cup to 200 entering in the event. And they'll be fighting for the tour card next year.
I want to circle back to DJ, George, just because of the fact that, he came in at 4 under par today, had a nightmarish opening hole where he tripled, didn't make it back to even par until about the 6th hole, and then he also bogeyed the 9th, but a bogey-free back 9, 5 birdies. It just seems like while he is the most solid player, it seems, over the course of the entirety of the PGA Tour season, he just has these kind of 1-hole or 2-hole meltdowns that kind of stand out and keep him from picking up the W's.
Yeah, Dustin, a little bit like some of the other aggressive players from the past. When they get rolling, Dustin is an unbelievable driver of the golf ball. And there is no fear. A lot like Greg Norman, Phil Mickelson, they take it to the edge. And if they happen to foul one off or a little bit off, that's just what happens. And what I do admire is typically Dustin walks right through it as if it doesn't even happen. And he's so good, he can recover. He's a guy, it's nothing for him to make 8-10 birdies in a round. That's not any big deal. So that's a lot of firepower.
Birdies and bogeys around South Carolina with GB3. So what is happening around the states as far as, we had the amateurs and all that kind of stuff being played? What major events do we have coming up involving maybe some of the juniors? And, of course, we've got the college fall golf season cranking up as well.
Oh, and that'll be fun to keep up with. I do want to recognize there's a young lady from Lexington, South Carolina. She's 13 years old. Her name is Molly Hardwick, and she just won the Best Daniel Junior Azalea down at the Country Club of Charleston. So this young lady she's a freshman at Lexington High School and follows the path of superstar named Lauren Stevenson. Lauren Stevenson, I was just talking to my daughter, is exempt, and I just learned this. I'm going to try to find out from her dad and mom live right here in Lexington. I'm going to find she's exempt to go to the finals for the LPGA Tour. So there's I've got a little homework to do before next week, but congratulations to Molly Hardwick, 13. She's now 14. She won the Best Daniel Junior Azalea, and that's her first big win. So, we were talking years and years ago, and that's part of the reason this show got started. Is you and I talked about players like Charles Warren, Lucas Glover, way back in the day, Kyle Thompson, and we made some predictions, and what do you know? It turned out. So these young players we're talking about now, I expect to see Lauren Stevenson on the LPGA Tour next year, and she is really, really good. So next week I'll have a little more on that topic. And then I think it's time for me to putt out this, and I just hit it stiff right inside the grip. So I'll knock this birdie in, and I'll talk to you next week. See him high, but shoot him left.
Thank you, my man. And you'll have the fairways to yourself come next Saturday afternoon because everybody be in those stadiums. Of course, there'll be some people getting out, maybe playing some early golf and then heading to the stadiums when the schedule allows. That's George Bryan III, birdies and bogeys around South Carolina with us here.
Could you fit in a round before the noon kicks? I mean, that
if you got depending on where you live and how early your course opens up, maybe that's be out there at 7 a.m. Play a 3.5-hour round, 10:30. Now, one thing about South Carolina and Clemson, as we all know, 12 o'clock starts, 12:30 starts. Tough on the traffic.
Yes,
because everybody's coming at one time, so that might be a little harder.
That's
but
what
those
I'm saying.
Late afternoon and evening starts.
Found the real reason why the people are complaining about the start time, so they can't get their round of golf in on game day. We'll do some.
That's a reason to complain.
We'll do some recruiting coming up, and we'll also get back into some more of the closing of camp talk with South Carolina and Clemson as we continue here on Sports Talk on a Friday, South Carolina Radio Network. More of your calls as well.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
We are back. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network Friday night edition. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, Brian Leonards, all together taking you into your last weekend of sanity. Let the insanity begin next weekend with the college football games. Got a few games, of course, this weekend, but nothing around here. Things will heat up starting next week. It'll be a very quick, before you know it, a very quick 12-week run. It always amazes me how quick the football season flashes before us. Before you know it, it's Halloween. Then you're into November. Thanksgiving is here. Got the big rivalry games. Then you're into the league championship games and then into the playoffs and the bowl game. So it is very, very fast. So you buckle up and hang on. Let's give you some recruiting on this Friday night. We begin with First Baptist running back Michael Dukes, who opened his season last Friday night, 178 yards and 3 touchdowns. Spent a lot of his summer in AAU basketball, but his focus is back on football now. And recruiters are picking up their intensity with him. He was offered by Virginia earlier in the week. He continues to talk regularly with running back coaches Bobby Bentley of USC and Tony Elliott of Clemson. USC's offered, Clemson has not. He said the Gamecocks tell him they want him. He says the Tigers tell him to be patient. He's also now hearing from Syracuse, Tulane, and Tennessee, and he's building a relationship with those recruiters. Got his first official visit set to East Carolina, September 7th, the weekend of the North Carolina game. And Pirates, he said, are making a strong play for him. They're in touch with him every day. He plans to set an official with USC for later in the season. Does not think he'll make it to USC or Clemson for their openers because of the early kickoffs. And right now, the schools recruiting him the hardest, he said, USC, Clemson, East Carolina, Arkansas, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Virginia. No leader at this point. Several basketball notes for you. USC offered in the 2020 class 6'5" Dylan Jones of Keenan. That's the third offer to a 2020 in-state prospect by Frank Martin. Of course, he offered the Dorman teammates P.J. Hall and Miles Tate, who were AAU teammates of Jones. USC's his first Power 5 conference offer. He also has offers from College of Charleston, SC State, Maryland Eastern Shore. He actually visited USC on Wednesday and got a chance to meet up with Martin and learn more about him and learn more about the program, and he was duly impressed by what he saw. And in fact, he said USC program, the way they run things, very similar to what he's used to in his high school program, which is an elite high school program. He said Clemson recruiter Steve Smith has been in touch once, but he's not getting strong interest from the Tigers at this time. Also, USC offered 6'9" Jared Jones of Mableton, Georgia, according to his dad. He's in the 19 class. He's a former Auburn commitment. Clemson's also offered him. Florida, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Florida State offered, among others. 6'7" point guard Josiah James of Porter Gaud. We know the schools he's going to visit officially. We now know the dates. Tennessee on September 7th, Clemson on September 14th, Duke on September 27th, and Michigan State October the 5th. USC was left off of his official visit list, but Gamecocks are still communicating with James and his group, his coaches, still trying to get a visit, but to this point, no avail. 2020 6'8" P.J. Hall of Dorman was offered by Kansas State. USC and Clemson have also offered him. And the College of Charleston landed a commitment from 6'3" Brendan Tucker of Lawrenceville, Georgia. Tonight, Deontay Stanley of Latta, home of champions, is going to announce his commitment, and it is could be UCF. UCF appears to be a school that has been pretty strong with him, so that'll be something he'll probably do after his game tonight. He's got several other offers, including East Carolina and multiple smaller school offers as well. So we'll bring that to you tonight on the high school scoreboards, which reminds me to remind you that we will have the high school scoreboards for you tonight beginning at 10 o'clock, 10:30, and 11 o'clock. We bring you as many final scores as we can during those 5-minute shows. So be sure to check it out on your affiliate that carries the shows. You can also follow along on our Twitter feed. Our Periscope will have it for you there as well, so you can catch those scores as we put them out coming up later on tonight. So with the ending of camps at USC and Clemson earlier this week and turning the focus now to the start of the regular season, Will, and as I mentioned at the outset of the show, I mean, there's not a lot left to be done in terms of filling in the lines on the depth chart. We pretty much know at this point who is going to play, at least from a starting standpoint. Really what we don't know, with the new rule in place allowing freshmen to play 4 games before a decision has to be made on a red shirt. We don't know how the coaches are going to use that and how much of the first-year guys are going to work in to games and when they're going to work them into games in terms of what part of the season.
Well, I think, both of these head coaches, talking mostly about South Carolina and Clemson, they both believe that if they have somebody who can be an immediate contributor, that rule does not apply. I mean, that rule will basically be for players who are maybe used for depth in the later part of the season. I think anybody who they foresee having a role on their team that will basically get time in the opening game, they foresee them having a larger role throughout the season. So this is not a rule the likes of, say, a J.C. Horn on South Carolina or Josh Vann. Those guys are going to be major contributors for the Gamecocks this year. And even for Clemson, maybe even a guy like Lynn J. Dixon, who's had a sensational camp. In my mind, that rule is not meant for those players. It's not meant for a Trevor Lawrence, who they are going to try to give every opportunity to get as many reps as possible. It could, and I even think also for South Carolina, it might not mean that rule for somebody like a J.J. Eningbare or a Rick Sandage, because those guys are going to need to be big depth players for South Carolina, and even also a guy like Dylan Wanham on the offensive line. It might be, though, for somebody even like a Recindo Lewis on South Carolina's defense, although he has had some very good work as well. I just don't know if that rule is going to apply to a lot of players, particularly on South Carolina, just because they're going to have to rely on many freshmen to take significant roles. I would say even more so than last year, because last year it seemed like they had freshmen all over the field, especially on the offensive line because of the attrition they had there. You talk about Jamias Williams last year. In my mind, I don't know how much it changes from the Gamecocks and Clemson perspective, except for the fact that you're thinking about maybe players in November who develop into larger roles over the course of a long season.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how different coaches use that rule. How they, like you said, some guys they're going to play, and they're going to play beyond 4 games. They're going to burn that freshman year because they're ready and they're needed. You look at Clemson, for example. They're so loaded at defensive end, barring injury. I mean, like right now, Xavier Thomas would be a third-team defensive end on their depth chart. KJ Henry would be as well. I mean, why would you, unless you made a promise to those guys that they wouldn't be redshirted, why would you burn a full year? I mean, I know Xavier Thomas is a guy that has looked very good in camp, but he's not been able to, move to the point where he is supplanting Austin Bryant or Cleveland Farrell. Now, they did lose Richard Jurgen to a retirement, and that opens up a bit of a personnel spot. I'm just saying, do you burn a guy's full year when when it comes to crunch time, in all likelihood, it's going to be Bryant and Farrell handling the defensive end duties, and those guys are going to have to sit and wait their turn.
Well, the other part of this too, Corn, is the fact that, one thing that Dabo Swinney is known for is playing a lot of guys, and I think that he doesn't want to feel like he is hamstrung by this 4 guys, because I feel like in a way this kind of frees up the ability to play some guys, but I also think that once you see guys contribute on a larger level, there is the temptation to want to leave them in there and let them see how they can develop, because there is no experience like game experience. There is no way to simulate what you learn from playing in a game by doing so in practice. So from that perspective, I don't know if that rule is going to have as big of an impact on either of these head coaches or teams as we initially thought. Sports Talk continues with the racing this weekend. Although we have no racing this weekend, we're really focused on Labor Day weekend.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
I have to admit a boo-boo. Corn.
Okay.
Normally in this space, we talk to Monty Dutton, the full Monty on NASCAR.
Correctamundo.
I wrote on the paper for our show sheet Monty Lee instead of Monty Dutt, but I put full Monty on NASCAR on the deal. And so he called Monty Lee, the Clemson baseball coach, The
I'm sure Monty Lee was surprised.
He's very surprised. I wanted to see if we could keep Monty on to talk to him about his trip to New York to see the Mets.
Yeah. I'm sure that would go against all the requirements of the Clemson Sports Information Department.
There are requirements, you say?
Apparently so. On some.
There are. So we
wish Monty Lee well, and we wish we had Monty Dutton. I hope we're having Monty Dutton here momentarily.
We are efforting Monty Dutton at this point.
All right. While we do that, let's talk about what's happening out there on the gridirons. High school football games are kicking off now across the state. We'll try and update you on some of the scores as they become available. As I mentioned in the conversation with David Shelton earlier, I think we've got some really good matchups around the states, both in the bigger level and 5A and even down in 1A tonight. I like some of the matchups that we talked about. So I think it's a good night for high school football. Looks like the weather is cooperating for the most part. Not sure of any major storms or anything like that moving across the state. So, and hopefully the heat is not going to be too much for people out there tonight. We should mention also that, we'll get to it. We should mention that Hayden Hurst, the former Gamecock, stress fracture in his foot, had a procedure today for a screw to be inserted and going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. So I hate to hear that.
Also found out, just kind of looking ahead on the weather, the weather situation for next week, there could be some of the R word involved when it comes to next week. 60% chance of rain at Williams-Brice, 50-50 shot at Clemson. Again, it's 8 days out. Weather reports can change, but there may be some ponchos needed. Maybe not so much the heat.
We don't want to hear that. That's for sure. Want to get things off to a good start weather-wise and a good start traffic-wise as we welcome in now for the full Monty on NASCAR, the real Monty for this segment, Monty Dutton of MontyDutton.com fame. We almost bumped you for Monty Lee by mistake there.
There's worse things, as Robert Duvall said.
What game are you at tonight?
I am at Lawrence at Clinton.
Oh, okay. Big rivalry game. Why was it delayed, or why was the kickoff moved to 8 o'clock?
They got this rule now that if the temperature is high enough, they have something. They have something called wet bulb thermometer. So it's actually beautiful and not that hot. But a week ahead, they decided it wasn't worth the risk, so they changed the game to 8.
Gotcha. And the humidity factors into that. They want to be really careful. Well, we got a week off before dark. Now, why did they put the week off in this particular weekend? What was the thinking behind that when they planned out the schedule?
Lawrence and Clement have never used a week 0, supposedly. They always wait another week and play consecutively through. But last weekend was an optional weekend, so. Lawrence was still jamboreeing.
I think
you
misunderstood.
Talking about NASCAR, yeah. Why did NASCAR put a week off this week? That's what we pay you for, NASCAR.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that big, hefty check.
Yes.
No, I think that, to be honest, I don't really know. It's like, it seems like it's probably somebody in the Prince family had a wedding to go to.
Oh. They still have that kind of power, huh?
In New Hampshire for that reason, because Mike Elton had one the year of 9/11.
Yeah. So Busch gets the win last week at Bristol. It was a typical Bristol race. Had the late wreck there between Kyle Busch and the 78 car that created quite a bit of controversy, and I'm sure that is something that Martin Truex will remember moving forward in the playoffs if he gets his opportunity to take a shot, maybe.
Yes, I think that it's down to two weeks before the playoffs, and because there have been 3 drivers who have dominated. That means that there's really not much drama left here. And so you have 2 races, Darlington and Indianapolis. They are interesting places. A lot of people don't like Indy anymore, but I still sort of it's a hard place, even if it's hard to watch on TV. So I think that the truth is because of the unique characteristics of this season, where a handful of people have dominated, like it hasn't been the case, I don't know, since the 70s, since the David Pearson, Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, with the occasional Cale Yarborough if he's not running Indy that year. So it's, the way the setup is now, I really think that the odds are the chase is going to be run for one person or the playoffs, because three of them, it's going to be hard for three of those guys to not be in the finalists at Homestead. And so the whole 9 races is sort of set up in all likelihood to have one finalist for the great sweepstakes at the end.
We don't have really anything to go off of practice-wise, Monty, but just as we sit here at 30,000 feet, a week and a half away, who do you think that this track next weekend favors the most out of the either contenders or just anybody who might be racing next weekend?
Darlington favors a great driver. The racetrack is like a sidewalk. The racing groove is like a sidewalk compared to most places. And it favors the people who don't make mistakes, who are the three that are up at the top. I think that their domination of the season is as much because of the crew chief and a cohesive crew that doesn't make a mistake at some point and eliminates itself. But other than that, I think the people who are just really fine drivers, I think somebody like Kyle Larson could come from nowhere and win at Darlington. Because Kyle Larson is a tremendously talented driver, and by nature, he also runs high. He can't only not run high at Darlington. There's no low. So I think that he'll be a person who'll put on a show down there.
Think we'll see a run at the track record in qualifying? You think that track's got a good bit of wear on it now, and they did some tire testing earlier in the year. Goodyear did. I'm sure they've got a particular tire that they'll be bringing in next weekend. Could we see the track record fall in qualifying?
Probably not, because as a general rule, new pavement makes a track faster, but old pavement makes the track more competitive. And so most track records, it could happen because the cars are, it depends on, as a general rule, all else being equal, worn track makes the racing a lot better, but it doesn't make the racing a lot faster.
Yeah. Get the sand on that track and start eating those tires too.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ridiculous comments is that one year they used to say on television that the reason that Darlington had such a surface was because the wind blew sand in from the ocean and it drowned the track. Of course, the ocean is a long way away. It's because of the sand hills and the fact that in prehistoric times the ocean came up to there. But that's one of the most laughable. I laughed for half a day when I heard that.
They don't know about the geography of the Palmetto State enough there, Monty. I think that one is.
Well, they ought to have enough sense to know the wind didn't blow from 75 miles away.
Yeah.
Or 60 miles away.
All right, you enjoy your game tonight, and we'll catch you next week to lead into the big weekend of racing at Darlington with the new look Darlington in terms of the seats and the cup holders and everything else. Be an exciting weekend. Thank you, Monty.
The stakeholders will have cup holders. Thanks a lot.
I know
Monty Dunn.
I know more about high school scheduling practices now than I thought I ever would.
Yes, we've had a interesting little segment there. We'll be right back here on Sports Talk.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
It is Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Whether it's low rates or high rewards, using select Founders credit cards on school supplies, clothes, a new computer, even college tuition will help prepare your kids for their first day of school. Apply online for a Founders credit card at foundersfcu.com/visa. Founders Federal Credit Union, official sponsor of Sports Talk. And with that, Corn, I think we can officially draw to the close the period known as the off season. We basically now strap ourselves in for 14, 15 weeks of action between the 13 weeks of football and, of course, the postseason weeks that come about. This is the prime time of the year right now.
Absolutely. Favorite time of the year, of course. And we've got one more stop on our Palmetto Pigskin Tour. That'll be on Tuesday at Limestone. So we look forward to being with the Saints. That will follow a trip to Clemson on Tuesday for Dabo Swinney's press conference. Will Muschamp will have his press conference on Monday. We'll have all that covered for you, of course, here on Sports Talk. And next week begins our season-long coverage of college football through a variety of eyes and voices. On Monday nights, we will be joined, of course, for our 1st and 10 segment, once again with Zach Willis to give us his insight on what happened the previous weekend. In this case, he'll be looking ahead to the start of the season for USC and Clemson. So we'll have that for you on Monday nights. And, of course, Mick Mixon will join us as well on Monday nights, our Monday Night Football recap of the Carolina Panthers, who are in action tonight against the New England Patriots in the NFL preseason play. So that's Monday. Tuesdays, of course, will be a Talking Tuesday with the press conferences covered. And, of course, we take your phone calls throughout these shows as well to get your thoughts on what has been happening at the USC, Clemson, and around the state. Tuesday will be, of course, a Talking Tuesday. We get to Wednesday, and, of course, we'll have the M&M boys back with us once again, Corey Miller and Will Merritt in their own, shall we say, humorous way of breaking down their respective teams and breaking down each other.
Maybe the two of them can actually figure out how to talk on the air without talking over each other.
I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's possible.
No.
Thursday
makes it easier to actually understand them when that happens, but who knows.
Thursday we'll have the coach and the quarterback once again, Chuck Reedy and Steve Tannehill, to give us their professional insights on what has been happening out there on the gridiron. And we get to Friday nights, which is Friday Night Fun Night, and we'll have, once again, the football filibuster. Jim Hodges back again to, let's see, did he win last year? I think he won last year.
Yes.
Let's go back and check the records.
He did.
I think he's back to defend, and he will be opposed this year by former Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer. Andre Bauer makes a return to statewide prominence with his visit on Sports Talk. So he'll be going up against Governor Jim Hodges 6:30 on Friday nights, picking those games. We'll have, of course, our professional picks as well at 6:45 on Friday nights. And then, of course, our regular visit with David Shelton on the high school sports report. So we got a bunch of great stuff for you coming up throughout the week. Every week as we head through a college football season, try to bring you a bunch of different views of what is happening out there. Some from a light-hearted standpoint, and others, of course, from a very professional and critical standpoint.
And don't forget, Thursday we will continue to do our visits with Morgan on the Move. Mike Morgan, of course, of the SEC Network and ESPN. And also on Thursday nights, we will continue to try and effort a lot of the opposing viewpoints as well. Usually we try to get somebody from the opposing sides of Clemson and South Carolina's opponents on Thursday and Friday, just to kind of get the view from the opposition as we go throughout the year. And it's funny, last year we had this happen with South Carolina and Clemson, where they had a common opponent with NC State. That'll happen this year with Texas A&M early on with the game with Clemson there in September. And, of course, Carolina hosting the Aggies later on in the season. So we will have some opportunities to kind of get some crossover there and get some early scouting on all those different games. But I guess, Corn, my question to you now is outside of the actual Palmetto Bowl, which of the two games for whether it's South Carolina or Clemson, which of the two games, at least from one of those teams, do you have your eyes most set on?
As far as I'm sorry, repeat your question again.
Which game for Clemson, which game for South Carolina outside of Palmetto Bowl is the one you are most looking forward to?
Oh, I mean, when you look up and down the entire season, of course, Georgia and South Carolina is going to be huge. Okay, that's going to kind of really set the table for South Carolina moving forward for the weeks to come. I mean, that's a game that's going to set up South Carolina either in a very good light or a very poor light. And I mean, you can recover from a loss. It's so early in the season. You can certainly recover from a defeat, and a victory is not going to mean that you're just going to run through the rest of your schedule and go undefeated. South Carolina has beaten Georgia in the past and gone on to have very good years, but has also stubbed its toe along the way. So it doesn't mean anything, definitely for how the rest of the season is going to play off. But you would much rather, with a home game with Georgia that early, a chance to really announce yourself nationally with a victory over Georgia. That's going to be big. And then from a Clemson standpoint, I really think that Florida State game late in the year, I mean, I know Texas A&M is sticking out on the schedule because of who they are, but I don't know that Jimbo Fisher's gone in there and fixed all their problems so quickly. They still have a porous defense. They still have questions at quarterback. They are going to be facing a great team on offense and defense in Clemson. So I don't really look at that one. I look a little further down the list. There aren't a lot of pretty games on Clemson's schedule as it stands right now. Really, Texas A&M, Florida State, and South Carolina. Because I don't expect Louisville, NC State, anybody else in the Atlantic, Georgia Tech from the other side. I'm not really expecting Clemson to get much of a push from any of those guys.
Well,
so if I had to single out one besides the Palmetto Bowl, I'd say that Florida State game. Because I think, with those quarterbacks staying healthy and the other people they have on offense, I think Florida State could be dangerous.
NC State is one. Both those teams are coming off a bye at that time. And I know NC State lost a lot on the defensive front, but they always seem to play Clemson close. Boston College played Clemson close last year at Death Valley. That is I would say if there was ever a slot for a look-ahead game, at Boston College is one, because of the fact that you have Duke and South Carolina looming in the penultimate and ultimate games of the regular season. That game, it screams trap game to me. And I know that that's not something that Dabo Swinney would like to hear or would like to hear asked about him. He doesn't want to hear the term that people no longer like to use in the upstate about what happens with Clemson and Clemsoning and things of that nature. But if there was ever a game, that one is like circled and bolded. I see danger there. And I'm not saying that they're going to lose that game. It's just that is one where I say, I am ratcheting up if I'm Dabo Swinney every bit last minute of preparation, because they've got a pretty darn good running back, a guy who could be maybe the player of the year in the ACC and A.J. Dillon. And they also are becoming more bullish on that defense. Steve Adazio has done a fantastic job with that group in getting them at least back to prominence. The Florida State game is something that is at least an outlier for me also, in the fact that you have to go down there for that. I just don't know what else is left down there. Similar to A&M, there's not going to be an immediate turnaround, and even similar to, I think, Florida on the SEC side, I just don't know if the turnaround is as immediate as the folks there would like to think.
I want to mention that USC women's soccer team beat Clemson last night 1-0. So USC gets the first point of the new year of the Palmetto Series. And some high school football scores. First quarters, Mullins 24, Creek Bridge nothing, Hilton Head 13, St. James nothing. And we've got Conway with a 3-0 lead over Nation Ford, and Myrtle Beach on top of Hanahan 7-0. And North Myrtle Beach leading Loris 7-6. Don't forget, the scoreboard shows coming up tonight, 10, 10:30, and 11. We'll have a great weekend.
You do the same.
Same to Brian Leonard. All of you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you Monday night right here on Sports Talk.